But those things, excuse me, but those things don't send you to jail. You went to jail. What'd you go to jail for? What'd you do that actually violated the law?
Right, and that's a very good point, because I talk about dirty tricks, but in this instance, it was a crime. And in New Hampshire in 2002, what happened was I was contracted by the Republican National Committee to jam Democratic phone lines. So there's only one thing that goes on Election Day, and that's getting out the vote. And so those phone lines on Election Day were used to call people to remind them to vote, where to vote, incoming phone calls, telling them where to vote, could they get a ride to the polls, that type of thing. And my job back then was to stop those phone lines from being able to make calls going out or coming in. And it was very effective for the bit of time that we did it. But it's an important distinction.
Well, how do you actually jam a phone line? Because I get too many calls.
Well, you know what? This was almost like an adolescent prank. It was a bunch of people calling those phone numbers over and over again and essentially overwhelming that phone line.
Okay, so let me ask you this, just between you and me. Did you get the election for Bush in 2000?
You know, I actually never worked for Bush. I did work for Steve Forbes, but couldn't bring myself to work for George Bush. And the reason for that is my sense was,
wow, a guy who went to jail could not make himself work for George Bush. That's quite a comment, my friend.
Well,
and when I say my friend, I mean I'm John McCain.
Right. My sense at the time, and obviously the irony is I worked for Steve Forbes, but you know, my sense at the time was Governor Bush was a guy born on third base but thought he hit a triple, and you know, it just didn't work for me. So, needless to say, I did go back and look for work out of the RNC while George Bush was president.
So why did you go to jail and a guy like Karl Rove never did?
Oh, he's smarter than I am. You know, look, here's, and I'll tell you why. Because when my government came to me and asked me what happened, I refused to lie. I decided that's where I drew the line, and I refused to lie. I told the truth, and frankly, I did that because it was important to me as a guy who's got kids, who teaches them tell the truth, do the right thing. Well, that was my instance where I had to do the same thing if I was going to be a good dad.
Well, I'm glad you drew the line somewhere. So, what should people be on the lookout for? I mean, this stuff obviously is going to happen again because, let's be honest, John McCain has hired a lot of the people from the old Rove machine, people who destroyed his campaign with dirty tricks in the 2000 election. So, what can people be on the out for, and how can they foil these nefarious tricks?
Well, the best way to foil it is just be informed of what your rights are. So, for instance, in 1981, in New Jersey, the Republican National Committee and the Republican State Committee hired off-duty police officers to stand in polling places wearing black armbands that said National Ballot Task Force with their side arms clearly in view in urban polling places. Well, that only had one intent, and that was to intimidate voters, essentially black voters, who already had, good reason to be suspicious of law enforcement. So these are the things that you might see. You might see flyers that say, hey, if it rains, you vote on Wednesday. Or because you live in a certain election district, you vote next week. These things happen. They happen every election cycle. And the only thing that you can do, and in fact, you're seeing it in New Mexico right now, there's a brewing scandal having to do with private investigators and, trying to intimidate voters. So the only thing you can do is know your rights, enforce your rights, keep your head about you, but don't be dissuaded.
And you hit on it there. This is really a racial thing, isn't it? I mean, the African Americans are the Democrats' most reliable voting bloc. They're 12% of the population. They vote 90% for Democrats. If you can suppress that vote, most elections decided by a few points, you can win the election. It is really all about race, isn't it?
There's no question, and the place where you're going to see that type of tactic used most, and it can be very, very effective. I've done it in the book. I referred to it as the angry black man call, and that is where you have, say, a targeted white household in a certain election district. You can do a surname select, so basically maybe they're Eastern European because there's ski at the end of their name, and you can call their house with a automated call, like you're kind of seeing in these Bill Ayers robocalls, and essentially the voice is a, essentially a black ghetto voice designed to elicit a certain responsive chord from that household, and you're urging them to vote Democratic. Well, what you're trying to do is you're trying to trigger a racial, bigoted reaction. As I said earlier, look, America's long been a debate about race. I think that that's why Barack Obama is such a transcendent candidate, but you need to be on the lookout for these things as we get into the final hours of this campaign, which we're nearly there.
All right, so if you hear a black ghetto voice, be on the lookout, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for sharing these insights with us. We really appreciate it, and I'm glad you repented. All right, Allen Raymond, everybody.